This week on the Destination Angler, is it possible to go to ponds where like nobody's been in there all year? Is that even possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe even it depends on how much you want to work for it. If you have a GPS and the know-how and are good with a map and compass, there may be places that are too small to float plane into and are too long of a walk for someone to really want to go to. Or,
Yeah.
there's not a trail system or anything, so you're bushwhacking, the woods get thick,
Oh man.
and you have to bring all your gear in with you. So I'm sure there's ponds that you could get to if you really work hard that people haven't been to in years.
Welcome to the Destination Angler Podcast, the podcast for anglers who travel. And I'm your host, Steve Haig. We go right to the source, the local guides and experts, to build your knowledge of top fishing locations around North America. It's a big world out there. Now go and fish it.
I'm going away for a while, but I'll be back soon. Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hey anglers, welcome back to another episode of the Destination Angler, brought to you by New England Nets, makers of handmade landing nets of exceptional quality that will complement your catch of a lifetime. By Trout Routes, the #1 fishing app, helping you find new trout waters so you spend less time on the road and more time doing what you love, trout fishing. And by Anglers Coffee, perfecting the coffee experience for the fly fishing community and anglers everywhere with small batch coffee delivered to your doorstep. It's darn near perfect. Coming up on the Destination Angler, we're headed to the Southern Sierras and the Kern River, famous for golden trout. After that, it's Boise, Idaho, and the wild and scenic Owyhee River. And be sure to backcast to catch the last episode of the Destination Angler on Twin Bridges, Montana, and the amazing rivers that converge there with bamboo rod maker Jerry Kustich, who's been fly fishing these waters for over 30 years. And remember to hit that subscribe button to catch all the Destination Angler episodes coming your way. And if you like the show, please tell a buddy. Want to be the first to know about new episodes? Well, head on over to the Destination Angler website and become a Destination Angler. Exciting news, new subscribers will be entered to win a New England net valued at $135. These beautiful landing nets are handmade in New England from local hardwoods, and the winner will be announced on the next show. And speaking of winners, our winner from the last show is Greg from Eagle, Idaho. Congratulations, Greg, on your free year subscription to Trout Routes, and thank you for being a Destination Angler. And today our destination is the Maine North Woods, and our guest is Nate Tower, owner of Heritage Waters Guide Service. Hey, if you're looking for an off-the-grid, unpressured fly fishing experience, then the Maine North Woods is where to go. Encompassing over 3.5 million acres and 6,000 ponds, these unspoiled waters are home to healthy, intact populations of wild and native brook trout and salmon, and ponds so remote you may be the only angler in there all season. Nate was born and raised in Maine, hunting and fishing these woods since he was a kid. After a life-changing trip to Montana as a teenager and a basketball coach who taught him to cast, Nate knew he was destined to make fly fishing his life's passion and never look back. Today, Nate works for the Maine Department of Environmental Protection, doing oil and hazmat spill response work while running his guiding business. He also guides for 2 historic fishing camps, Weatherby's Lodge and Libby Camps. Nate gives us a rundown on the area and how to scope out the best ponds, strategies and tactics for big brookies on the fly, why water temps, wind, and structure are so important, along with his top confidence fly patterns. You'll also hear great tips on sinking lines and how to spot those all-important cold springs. So pack your sat phone and gas up the truck, because we're going off the grid to the Maine North Woods. Nate, welcome to the show.
Hey, Steve, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic to have you. I've never been to Maine, I got to admit it, but the Maine North Woods sounds really intriguing. 3.5 million acres, man. That sounds amazing.
Well, and then some. So that's the North Maine Woods, and then there's still some other parcels out there that you could group into there for public access.
Yeah, I was looking on a map, and I mean, there's a lot of roadless areas up there too, isn't there?
Yeah, and a lot of what you're on is kind of like your 2-track. You take your main logging roads, and then you'll branch off onto these smaller skidder trails and other roads that you might not really see from a Google image until you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten lost up there? That sounds like a recipe for getting lost.
I've been turned around.
Okay. Not lost.
We don't get lost. Yeah. Get turned around. Yep.
Get turned around. You got a compass or something with you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Compass, GPS, and a Maine Atlas is a staple in everyone's truck up there.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's awesome. Well, all right. So here we are in March. So how's your winter been?
It's been good. It's been busy. This is our busy time for work, for oil and hazmat spills. So
Okay.
I do a lot of tying in my off time as well. Been getting into a lot of big striper flies too, which are time consuming. Where I actually
Okay.
live closer to the coast, but been busy for sure. But looking forward to spring. We had a nice 45, 50-degree day today, so I can feel it coming.
How about that? When does the season open up?
We do have some year-round fisheries. They're not really great. A lot of them, more so things are locked up with ice and size fishing. But traditionally, our season is April 1st through September 30th when we're talking especially wild trout and salmon. Some things do have extended seasons, but that's one thing you want to do. You really want to read our law book because we have a lot of special regulations by specific drainages and each individual body of water will have its own regulations potentially.
What's your experience as far as when's ice out? When does the fishing really start to pick up?
Ice out, trick question. So in southern Maine, you can certainly get out there and start fishing, inlets, outlets, things like that right now. Some of the extended season stuff. April 1st, depending on the year, we've had some mild winters the last couple. So, and this year's kind of looking like that as well. I would say mid-April, you should be getting out on some ponds in southern central Maine. As you head further north, it can be a difference of a full month. A lot of our bigger lakes, let's just say the Rangeley region, that's usually right around May 10th, going into the second week of May. When you get up into the smaller ponds in far northern Maine, you're safe with the third week of May.
Oh, that late. Wow.
But
Okay.
everything changes. I mean, you could have a pond that's small and is at the base of the northern face of a mountain in northern Maine that could be iced over the last week of May when ponds around it have been iced out for a week longer. So
Okay.
it's tricky and it takes a lot of time, a lot of years to really dial that in.
Yeah, I guess. Do you try to target ice out in some of these lakes? Is that a good time to fish?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of big fish cruising in the shallows, they get pretty lethargic in that cold water throughout the winter.
Right.
Bug life slows down. Smaller bait fish, aren't as active. So as soon as everything starts waking up, that's when, the big fish want to, I guess we a lot of times we say put the feed bag on. So they'll be cruising the shallows looking for some easy meals.
How about that? And you're just a guy to feed them one.
Right.
So your website, I love this. It says Maine offers a vast expanse of recreational opportunity in our backyard and is home to some of the best fly fishing opportunities America has to offer. All right, tell me about that.
Yeah.
Back that one up. That's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everyone always thinks of Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Utah. And of course, yes, they are kind of the mecca of fly fishing, but we have a long history of fly fishing in Maine as well. And as far as public access goes and the variety of fish, the quality of fish, and really everything as a full package, I think that we should be grouped with any other state.
Yeah.
We have pike, we have muskie, we have smallmouth, largemouth, and I'm talking all phenomenal fisheries if you know where to look. Brook trout, salmon, lake trout, rainbows and browns, those are stocked fisheries. A couple wild fisheries, but you name it, it's really endless opportunity for sure.
And when you say salmon, are you talking about you're talking about landlocked salmon, right?
Yeah. So landlocked Atlantic salmon.
Yeah, and those are a buddy of mine has been up to the Rangeley area and caught some of those. And we did a show a year or two ago, I can't remember, on the Penobscot, and I guess those are a ton of fun to catch.
Oh yeah, definitely. The West Branch of the Penobscot can be a lot of fun. Rangeley has some phenomenal salmon fishing as well, and really, the salmon that we have here that we're talking about are, we have a stocking program, and we do have some native salmon that were landlocked, from the ocean. They've been like
Yeah.
that ever since. But Sebago salmon, so one of our bigger lakes in southern Maine, I would call it Southern Maine, is actually the strain of salmon that is stocked pretty widely over the state and over the world, actually. Salmo solar Sebago is actually the scientific name. And they actually stock them and raise them down in like Argentina and Chile as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. So we really have some of the better salmon, I guess. If you want to
Yeah,
put
I
it that
guess.
way. Yeah.
Now you've done some salmon fish. I think you're telling me a couple of weeks ago when we first talked about a story of a salmon that was trying to pick your lake trout that was trying to pick your pocket. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Just last fall actually. And that's kind of one of the crazier experiences I've had. So this was a lake, an outlet to a lake, and it's kind of a known area for some salmon to be showing up in the fall in October. Happened to be fishing there, caught maybe a 17, 18-inch salmon. And
Nice.
as I was fighting it, I was they spend a lot of time in the air. They like to jump all the time. And I was looking and thinking, geez, this is really jumping more than your average salmon. And then you can see this big shadow behind it. And I was thinking, well, maybe an otter, or I don't know. I didn't really know what to think. It was such a big shadow. And then as I'm trying to net the fish, here comes this big lake trout, probably in the 38, 40-inch class, trying to eat this salmon,
Oh
trying
my
to take it
gosh.
out of the net. And I'm trying to unhook the salmon, just throw it back and try to go get something that would be capable of catching this fish. So I ran up to the truck and just kind of scrounged around for anything I could find. Generally have some bigger flies, striper fly, or I don't remember what it was, the first one. Like an 8-inch big white fly, a lot of motion. Biggest thing I had, I was up there, for fall salmon. So had a lot of soft hackles and traditional streamers. And I throw that out there. I had brand new 10-pound test on and couldn't see this fish anywhere. Had no idea. Blind cast, throw it all the way out there at this rock pile, second strip, and it inhaled it and just took me for a ride. I couldn't
Really?
turn him. He went straight out to the big lake. Wasn't able to turn him. Kind of now or never. You're in your backing. Gotta turn him, or you're gonna lose him. And
Wow.
tried to turn him, broke him off. And
Oh.
then the next day, I made my phone calls and told everyone, regardless of if they believed me. Called up my dad, told him about it. We've been fishing there forever. And then the next day, I was there fishing similar time, and I had a friend actually come walking up. Didn't know he was in the area. Happened to walk up. We started fishing in the same spot. Just telling him this story.
Yeah.
Pretty. You could tell he was thinking kind of far fetched. It was a far fetched sounding story.
Yeah.
And he hooks his first fish, about an 18-inch salmon. And sure enough, here's this big shadow chasing it around. Different fish, smaller fish. And I ran back to the truck. I had scrounged up an 8-weight that the night before and found another decent size, 6 to 8-inch big white fly, and had that all rigged up, ready to go in the truck. And so I ran back. I was like, I got the thing for this, and I threw it out there. I mean, it's right next to the salmon. It's right on that salmon. Actually, trying to hit it. He's trying to keep it away. Got the fish to turn a couple of times. Come look at it. Wasn't too interested. Just kind of mouthed it a little bit, and would keep going back to the salmon. And as we're trying to net the salmon, he grabs onto it, and I actually have a video somewhere, and he's shaking the salmon around
He's got the salmon in his mouth.
in his mouth. Yep. And couldn't get him to leave that salmon and come back to my fly. So I just laid down, and it was like a 4-foot drop, and scooped him somehow. And it was like a 34-inch lake trout.
Wait, you grabbed the fish with your bare hands then?
I scooped him in the net.
Oh, you did?
Yep.
Oh, really?
Scooped him in the net. And yeah, he must have been, we didn't put a tape on him, but I would say conservative estimates probably around 34 inches. This
Wow.
monster lake trout. So that, they're there.
Yeah.
Keeps it interesting, but
Yeah.
first time I've ever had anything like that happen.
That's pretty amazing. And what time of year do you get lake trout in that shallow?
Generally, they go to shoals to spawn in November for the most part. This was, I want to say, third week of October. So I think it's a little bit early for that kind of lake trout activity, but that's not really something that I usually do. Or, I don't go targeting fall lake trout because they're a little bit too late after most of these lakes close, September 30th. This was an extended season spot, and that was closing in October as well. So
I get you.
generally don't target them in the fall, but ice out, you can target them on some of the bigger lakes.
Right. Right. That's cool.
Yeah.
Huge news, folks. The #1 fishing app, and I'm talking Trout Routes here, has been updated to include the entire lower 48. That's 50,000 streams mapped and classified into 4 categories and 350,000 hand-curated public access points marked and ready for you to explore. You know, there's nothing more exciting than finding that new trout stream or access point. I'm a huge fan of Trout Routes because they make it so easy. Say goodbye to stumbling around country roads looking for your next spot, because Trout Routes provides every detail you need for each stream, including public and private bridges, stream flows, trail access, where to park, camping opportunities, boat ramps, and more. No service, no problem. You can save maps for offline use. With Trout Routes, I've found dozens of new streams and access points I never would have known about. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for Trout Routes today on your Apple or Android phone. Well, let's shift gears. Let's talk about the Maine North Woods. So why is that such a special place? Obviously, it's huge, but give us kind of the lowdown on the Maine North Woods.
So the North Maine Woods is
Thank
actually
you.
a piece of private land. Not when I say a piece, it's 3.5 million acres roughly. It's privately owned by logging companies, but you hear that a lot in the fly fishing community or just outdoor recreation. Is especially out west, is there's this great river, there's this great pond, but it's completely private, or there's this quarter-mile stretch you can fish, the rest of it's off limits, or you go down through in a drift boat and you can't anchor because the substrate, the bottom of the river is owned by the same
Right.
owner on either side, therefore that's posted. Hear crazy stuff like that, and that always just seems like such a wild concept to me, because we have stuff like this where it's privately owned, have good relationship with the people of Maine, and it's all gated access on logging roads, which are relatively well maintained. The main roads anyway are maintained, all dirt, by the logging companies, and you have to pay an admission fee. So I want to say last year I get a season pass, and if you guide at certain lodges and stuff, then you're able to go in and go to these lodges, or
Right.
make camps and stuff. But I think it was $12 a day, and then overnight it was like 13, because there's a lot of
Okay.
primitive campsites up there, first come first serve. So yeah, so you have 3.5 million acres at your disposal, dozens and dozens of campsites. Obviously the big thing is you want to be careful with fires, because of course it's logging companies granting this permission. So
So it's a logging company that owns it then. Okay.
yep, logging companies.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a conglomerate, is my understanding of it. But yeah, so we have that, and that's where majority of these ponds are,
Okay.
for your wild and native brook trout fisheries.
How many ponds are there?
Well, in Maine as a whole, there's something like 6,000 plus stillwater fisheries. Those are just ones that the state's identified and given an identification number to, not necessarily a name. They can range anywhere from maybe 5-6 acres up to I'm talking tens of thousands of acres, some of the bigger lakes. So that's encompassing all of them, but there's also some that probably aren't named or given an identification number that could hold brook trout.
They're just numbered. Some of them are just numbered even.
Yeah, a lot of them are just numbered.
Huh.
Or some of them will have multiple names, or some of them will have a local name, a map name, and then maybe a name that the state identifies them by,
Oh my
which can
gosh.
make it a little confusing, but kind of keeps it fun.
Okay. Sounds like a remote area. And is it possible to go to ponds where like nobody's been in there all year? Is that even possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Or maybe even, it depends on how much you want to work for it. If you have a GPS and the know-how and are good with a map and compass, there may be places that are too small to float plane into and are too long of a walk for someone to really want to go to, or
Yeah.
there's not a trail system or anything, so you're bushwhacking, the woods get thick,
Oh man.
and you have to bring all your gear in with you. So I'm sure there's ponds that you could get to if you really work hard that people haven't been to in years. But yeah, it's certainly remote. Some of them are road access, some are plane access, some are there's multiple ways to get around. They do not allow four-wheelers or bicycles though.
Oh, they don't. Oh,
They
that's
don't.
too bad. Why is that? Because of noise or? Wonder why.
I think because of damage probably to roads. You know, they don't want
Okay.
ATVs and things ripping up the roads.
Huh.
Bicycles, I'm not sure. I think that might be more of a safety thing.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, they don't want anyone to get hurt up there. I mean, it is really remote. There's no cell phone service. There's all these logging trucks are running off of CB radios, so it's a good idea to have one or some kind of satellite connection.
Sure.
I historically didn't have a whole lot. Now I use a Garmin GPS that has satellite. I can make a satellite emergency call, or I can satellite text, depending on what you buy for subscription. So
Gotcha.
peace of mind.
Was there a reason you decided to go get one? Did something happen?
No, nothing happened other than I got older and a little bit smarter, and I just
Okay.
knew that it's only a
All
matter of
right.
time before. You know, you have a some kind of catastrophic truck malfunction even up there that you're not able to fix on the spot. Then I mean, it could be days, it could be weeks, it depends on, you know,
Really?
did you tell someone your plan and where you might be. And
Okay.
I change when I'm fishing on my own or with friends. We change up our plans a lot. You know, we can end up 2 hours, 3 hours north of where we originally were starting or planning to fish, because maybe, you know, the hatch we were looking for wasn't happening, or so on. So
Yeah.
we bounce around a lot. And you know,
Okay.
I'll tell someone, hey, I'm going I'm going up here, I'm going to start here, and then if we're not here, we're going to go here, and we're going to go here, and they're like, that's like, you know, 50 square miles. Like, right, somewhere
Yeah.
in
Good
there.
luck. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and you want to be prepared. You want to have spare tires. There's a lot of shale up there, so you
Okay.
you can slice a tire pretty easily. I run all 10-ply tires, you know, aggressive tires, and have spares and plug kits and a low compressor. If you're going to do it on your own, you want to be prepared for that.
How good can the fishing be, particularly when you get to one of these remote, pristine lakes that nobody's been on?
You know, just like any fishing, it can be totally hit or miss, but generally you're rewarded with the amount of effort that you put in. You know, they're
Okay.
not seeing the pressure. It also depends on the pond. Generally, if you're talking big trout, then you're talking small population. And if you're talking, you know, smaller fish, bigger population, right? So you can go to a pond that's full of 8 to 12 inch brook trout and just catch one after another. Doesn't even matter what you throw. You have days like that. Sometimes you have days on ponds where it's the same scenario, but 16-inch fish. Or there's some ponds where there's one in particular where it's known for producing, you know, 6 to 8 pound brook trout. Some of the biggest brook trout and fastest growth in the state. But I hear about people going there for a weekend and getting one or two hits and maybe catching a fish or losing a
Wow.
fish at the boat, you know. So a whole weekend for one fish. So it's all relative based off of what the pond can support, you know.
And are you always taking a boat in with you?
No, there's a lot of boats and canoes that are actually stashed at these ponds.
Yeah, I read about that.
You don't know until you go.
Yeah. Like who puts those boats up there? Other guys or?
Anybody, yeah, there's guides and lodges, and a lot of times those will be locked up and oftentimes stenciled so you know whose they are, which can also give you a bit of information sometimes. But a lot of times it's just people that have been going up there forever and said, you know, I'm really tired of carrying a canoe a quarter
Yeah.
mile, half mile into here. I'm not that attached to it. I'm just going to leave it here. So, and over the years, you'll have usually a bunch of leaky canoes and boats that
Oh,
you don't
okay.
care too much about, or you see they've repaired them there on the, you know, on the spot. I use a float tube a lot of times, or if I'm able to carry in my lightweight raft or my little fly craft, or or canoe. But float tubes are great.
Okay, you like the float tubes then. Okay.
Yeah.
And you can cover enough water in a float tube to do well.
Yeah. I mean, you also want to take into account the wind, how far your hike is. You know, if you hike in, you know, 3 miles or something like that over rough terrain, and then you kick around this pond fighting the wind for 4 or 5 hours, and then
Oh
you have to
man.
go lug all that gear back out that same distance. It
Yeah.
can be pretty tiring. So know what you're getting into and know that you're up for it.
Huh, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard of these Kevlar boats. They're expensive, right? But they're super light. You know, guys that have any of those?
I don't have any. I have Royal X canoes. So they're generally, most people want to fish with two people. So I try to at least have
Yeah.
bigger boat, more stable. Those Kevlar canoes have always piqued my interest, but these Royal X ones, they're like a 16-foot boat is probably 60 pounds.
Oh, that's nice.
So yeah, it's not too bad as long as you got another person to help you with the gear. But if you're strapping on your gear to the canoe and then putting that on your shoulders, that's quite a bit. So
Yeah, good luck.
these float tubes are all, I think my heaviest one's probably 13, 14 pounds. And then you just bring in a little pump that's pretty lightweight, some flippers, a 4-piece rod tube and some flies. And I bring my own, I bring a filter too to filter water. I find that helped a lot, to not have to carry all that
Yeah.
weight in water. If you just filter whatever it is that you're fishing in, scoop that up and filter it. That helped a lot.
Okay. Are there any towns in the area? I mean, where are you getting like all your supplies? Like, is there a fly shop up there somewhere, or what are you doing about all that?
No, again, come
Nothing,
prepared
huh?
with everything you might need. You have those last stops, like say you're going, like Millinocket is a common place to go and access Baxter State Park or North Maine Woods from there. That's kind of your last stop for fuel. I bring an extra gas can and all that. So most of the time you're talking townships, if anything, up that way, or a lot of them are numbered, not even townships because they're not actually inhabited by anybody, for the most part. So a lot of them are like, say, T10R8 would be the name of a geographic area, and that's how
Yeah.
it's been kind of sectioned off on a map so that you can have some bearing or some reference. But all of our atlases, you'll see a lot of that.
Hey anglers, are you looking for a darn near perfect cup of coffee to start your day? Then do yourself a favor and check out anglerscoffee.com. That's right, Anglers Coffee is made by anglers for anglers, delivered to your doorstep, one batch at a time. They start with the very best coffee beans selected for their great flavor and responsible growing methods. Then each batch is roasted fresh daily. The result is a wide selection of roast styles that will satisfy the most discerning coffee lover. And now you can enjoy Angler's Coffee anywhere, anytime with the Dry Dropper single-serving coffee in a tea bag. Just add water. And this isn't your mother's instant coffee. It's a single serving of carefully dark roasted, fresh ground and nitro-sealed coffee. A percentage of each sale goes to some great nonprofit organizations that directly impact the fly fishing community. So head on over to anglerscoffee.com to check out their great selection of coffee and the organizations they support. If you're not 100% satisfied, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. That's Angler's Coffee. It's darn near perfect. Is there a way to break down this 3.5 million acres? Like, are there sections? How do you think about it?
So ultimately, everything up there is going to provide some sort of trout or salmon fishery for you to some extent. I'm not going to say everything, but a majority. Brook trout have a way of, they have cold, clean water, they'll find a way. So not really. So if you look at native brook trout, so the thing about these trout are they're truly native, most of them. A lot of self-sustaining populations. We have something like 90% of the remaining intact wild populations in the US. 90% of what's in the US that's left over is in Maine. Of those, I think there's something like 580, that seems to come to mind, 600, somewhere in there, ponds that have been classified as heritage waters, which is actually what I named my business after, because I find them very interesting. Glaciers receded and there was these little ponds, and you've had these populations closed off from the rest of the world living in that pond since the glaciers receded. So each pond can almost have its own characteristics in fish. You can go just 10 miles away from one pond and they'll have totally different characteristics, act different, feed different,
really,
and have different coloration. Yeah, really, really interesting, I think. Anyway,
like what do you suppose is behind that?
I think a number of things. The vegetation and the substrate that you have brook trout have a great way of, and trout in general have a great way of blending in with their surroundings. So I think that they take on some coloration for camouflage, and then the rest of it, I think pigmentation and things like that would be more related to the food source. So, if they're eating a lot of bait fish, or instead of yeah, bait fish are their forage more so than insects, then I think they'll take on a different coloration. That's the only things that really seem to make the most sense to me. But then within that pond, they're breeding and living in that pond as a one small population,
Right.
forever. So
That's cool.
they're not able to get that genetic drift, genetic variation, because it's such a small, close population.
Do you get excited to catch one of these native, like super native trout? Is that,
Oh, absolutely. And
yeah,
and that's kind of the thing too. I get the question a lot, like, well, what can we expect for size? And a lot of times that's what I'll ask people is, what is it you're looking for? Do you want to just catch a wild brook trout? What, or lots of them?
right.
Smaller size? Are you after a trophy? Or what is their goal? Because ultimately, I think, if you're in a little beaver bog on the side of the road and you catch a 10, 12-inch brook trout, that's absolutely a trophy for that given body of
Yeah.
water,
For that spot.
and,
Sure.
and you may have been the only person to fish it. And, I think just the experience of being there is more so what I'm after, more than the fish is just getting out there and,
Yeah. Love that.
maybe not seeing a soul and just you and nature and the fish. I spent 2 weeks September in northern Maine, and I saw 4 trucks. This was just
In 2 weeks.
2 falls ago. Yep. And they didn't appear to be fishing. Just kind of driving around. Could have been, looking at some properties for logging or something like that. But I didn't run into another fisherman in 2 weeks.
You were fishing. That's what you were doing.
I was
up there.
fishing. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. What a trip.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. And I mean, of that 3.5 million acres too, this isn't including any state parks or state maintained, wildlife management areas or anything like that. That's just this private piece of land called the North Maine Woods. Besides that, too, you have Baxter State Park, which has a ton of hike in fly fishing opportunities. I mean, a ton of them. For being much smaller than North Maine Woods, there's still a lot of opportunity there.
So people do fly in quite often then.
Well, really, you're going to fly into probably Bangor, Portland, or Augusta. Those are your options. And then you're going to have a couple-hour ride elsewhere, unless you can afford a float plane or a much smaller plane that can bring you to a municipal airport or something like that. And then you still have to drive from there or hop on a float plane.
Okay.
But Baxter has a lot of small ponds that aren't quite big enough to fly into. I want to say it's something like 210,000 acres.
That's huge.
And that's the state park. And then next to that as well, there's a new national monument that abuts it called Katahdin Woods and Waters. And Katahdin is our tallest peak. That's in Baxter.
Isn't that where the Appalachian Trail ends?
Yes, at the peak of Baxter is the end, or the start for some people. But I know it's
right.
better to end on Baxter Peak on Mount Katahdin.
Okay.
And I want to say that's like 100,000 acres or something like that too. So all in that same area.
How are the mosquitoes in the summer?
They can be pretty bad.
I've heard.
not like you hear about Alaska, where they say that's their state bird. I hear that quite often. I would say if we were going to call something our state bird, it'd be the black fly. The black flies are far more fierce than the mosquitoes, I find.
Yeah.
Actually, more so on the coast, you get the no-see-ums and the mosquitoes.
Oh yeah.
Bug me more so. But the black flies, it's just, I mean, you get used to it. But your first time in Maine, you come like late May, early June, and if it's your first experience with black flies, you want to be prepared. Maybe a bug net, plenty of DEET, cigars, whatever you have, because it gets to the point sometimes where you open your eyes and they fly into them. They fly into your ears.
Yeah.
You take a breath.
Gosh.
You take a breath and you have a mouthful of them.
Yeah. That's when you and your buddy have one head net and you're like, I'll sell it to you for $100.
I was in Rangeley actually a few years ago, and there was this family from out of state, and It's like a family of 5 or 6, and they were just trying to walk along the river. They weren't even fishing. I don't think. I think maybe the father wanted to fish a little bit, and they were asking me where they could get a bug net. They had been over to every store that they could have. There's a couple places in Rangeley, and then they went over to Errol, New Hampshire, tried to find something. Everyone was sold out because it's that time of year.
Yeah.
Generally, they're like $3 to $6 for a little cheap little bug net. And I actually remember listening to your podcast with Aaron Broadus, and he said he kind of takes it as a kind of a level of pride, as a Mainer, just suck it up. And that's kind of how I usually am.
Oh my
gosh.
Yeah.
It's just deal with it. It's kind of, it'll get, you'll stop noticing them, you get kind of accustomed to them and they don't bug you quite as much.
Does
but I had a
DEET
bug
work?
net on that day. Yeah, DEET work.
Okay.
Yep. But I had a bug net on that day, and I wasn't giving it up for anything. And I think they offered me something like $80 to $100 for that.
Did they really? I
I
was
said,
kidding, but that's happened to you, huh?
Oh yeah, no, they offered me some good money for it, but I wasn't giving it up for anything.
No, you're like,
there's
nah.
5 of you anyway. You're doomed.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can be ferocious.
Even in Michigan, you can get some days where the bugs are pretty bad like that. You're just breathing them in all the time, and the head net's awfully nice.
Yep, but a lot of times it clears out the crowds. That was on a river that often gets crowded, and it was a beautiful day, great fishing, and there was a lot of people that left the river that day. So
there's some bug spray that I've only seen in Wisconsin, because they have some no-see-ums and whatnot up there, and it's called Buggins, and it's kind of like a vanilla thing, and you got to spray it on like every 2 hours, but it works really good.
no kidding.
Buggins, it's called.
Is it kind of all natural?
Yeah, it's all natural, kind of vanilla. It smells kind of vanilla-y. I don't know exactly what's in it, but we were dying up there. DEET was not helping us. And then some local guy came by, my son and I, and said, here, try some of this. And it's like, problem solved.
And DEET is it's terrible for you. So if I can stay away from it, that's great.
Yeah.
Especially, and it seems like the oily stuff actually works better, but that's just kind of a pain. And DEET will melt a lot of synthetics too.
Yeah, it melts your fly line too if you get it on your fingertips.
Fly line, I've had it
done.
ruin. I had a nice pair of Costas one time that I got all over. It was their plastic lens.
Yeah.
I use the glass now, but so it doesn't seem to be an issue, but I just try to keep that off of everything, including myself if I can.
Now, so you guide on your own, but you also guide for a couple of these like historic lodges, right? Could you tell us about that? What kind of experience do clients get up there?
Yeah, so I guide for Libby Camps, which is in that North Maine Woods area that we're talking about. You would go in through, there's a number of gates. You go in through the Oxbow gate at Oxbow Township, which Libby's actually the Libby family sort of founded, or they claim to have. A lot of these places have been founded more so from the logging industry. They go up, cut wood, they would dam up, make some kind of impoundment, dam up a stream, and then use the water to drive logs to where the populations and the mills were. And so that's how people originally got to all these locations. But then Libby's was kind of the first in the area to start, promoting fishing and hunting and this wilderness experience to come up and be guided and stay in sort of, I guess, the closest thing you could have to, luxury and all the amenities. It started as a big inn, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all kinds of cool pictures of, all these big bucks hanging on the porch of this inn.
Cool.
So you can get, really good food, and you still can get really good food. And they're open year round. It's a big snowmobile stop as well. But now they're cabins. They actually were once on an island on the lake that they're on now, Millinocket Lake, which there's 2 of them. This is the northern Millinocket Lake, just to add a little confusion. And then they actually brought the camps onto land. I don't remember if they floated them or brought them across the ice. A lot of camps had done that in the past, come across the ice, but I want to say they floated them to where they are now, and they've expanded some. So they really specialize more so. That whole area is more stillwater fishing. There are some rivers and streams that are great fishing as well, but primarily you'd want to go there for those wild brook trout ponds. They offer a lot of flyouts as well, so you can go there. It's all inclusive. You can purchase different packages where you can stay in where they feed you every meal, and then you can have a guide, or you can just have a cabin and take off on your own and go fish wherever you want.
Nice.
They have some outpost cabins as well. You can rent out and just kind of, do the DIY thing
Yeah,
yourself,
cool.
or pay extra if you want to do a day and fly out. I'm not sure what that's going for this year, but it can definitely be worth it depending on where you want to get.
It looked pretty affordable. I was on their website. First of all, the places, it was started 130 years ago. I mean, it's
Yeah.
old, right? And it
Yeah.
looked pretty affordable. Didn't look too bad.
Yeah, I think it's a great value, really.
Yeah.
Where they have some phenomenal food, especially the desserts.
Oh, man. Bet that tastes good.
Yeah, it's great, especially after a long day.
Yeah.
And then Matt, one of the better pilots that you'll find Matt Libby, one of the better pilots you'll find in the state. He'll get you where you need to go, and it's a lot of fun. It's just a whole new experience.
Oh, that sounds like a blast.
To drive all the way up there and then go, geez, I'm in the middle of nowhere. And then you hop in a plane and go even further.
Even farther.
Yeah, it's a great experience.
What's the other one? Is it Weatherby's? Is that right?
Yep, Weatherby's Lodge. They're based out of Grand Lake Stream, somewhere that I've been fishing forever. I guess that's really where I refined some of my fly fishing skills. We've been going up there forever. I have a family friend that has a camp there as well. So we spend a lot of time there, especially in the fall. But phenomenal, really world-class smallmouth fishing in that area.
Huh.
But it's known for the landlocked salmon. And that's one of the first lakes that had native landlocked salmon. So one of the original lakes.
That's nice.
And it's actually I'd say some of the clearest water of any river in the state. Just gin clear. It's one of the few places that you can actually go and sight fish for salmon, sitting on a sandy, gravelly bottom in bright sun. You can see them clear as day.
Ah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's great up there. And that's all inclusive too. I mean, you can do the stay in a cabin,
Okay.
have all your meals, have your guide and everything. They don't do flyouts. You could fly in there, but you have to, I think it's Penobscot Island Air or Katahdin Air will fly out there.
Okay.
If you wanted to get into, I think Bangor, they could fly you out of.
Okay. And what about your guide service? What kind of trips are you doing?
So I'm really doing anything. I specialize more so in the trout and salmon, but I'll do smallmouth or pike or anything too. I'm thinking about getting into striper fishing. I do a lot of striper fishing on my own, and I may offer some
Nice.
trips eventually. But it's really, you give me a call, tell me what it is that you want to do. What is it that you had in your mind for your trip to Maine? Or I get people that are like, I'll be in the Moosehead Lake region, and with the family, and we're doing just family vacation stuff, but I'll have a day to get away and go fishing. And then I'll say, okay, I can meet you here. We can go from that area, or I can really tailor it to whatever it might be that you're looking for, even if it's an extended trip, and you want to do the more primitive camping type trip. I can give you some ideas of what are some of the better campsites of those primitive campsites that are first come, first serve in the North Maine Woods, or meet you right in Millinocket, follow me up there, find your campsite, and then fish with me a day or two, and then continue your trip.
Sounds like you do some multi-day trips then.
Yeah, I'll absolutely do some multi-day trips if that's something people are interested in.
That's cool.
And it just depends on if you want all the amenities or if you want to do the really roughing it kind of primitive camping.
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, tell me about what's your story? I'd love to hear about your childhood. So you grew up in Maine,
Yep.
exploring these woods as a kid. What was your childhood like?
So my dad, my grandparents, I mean, everybody in my family on both sides were avid outdoorsmen. So I spent a lot of time as soon as I could really walk, just tagging along with my dad, fishing and hunting, not so much hunting, following him. He's hunting and just getting a feel for, what it is that hunting's all about. And so I had a really strong foundation in all things outdoors. Did a lot of sports as well, but I found more so that I was thinking about, being out in the woods when you're at, basketball practice or soccer practice. So I always really enjoyed that stuff. And my dad originally taught me all the basics. He fly fishes, and I'd say he's intermediate. At the time, he was more beginner, and he taught me the basics of fly fishing, and I became more interested in that. And at the time that I really got into fly fishing, my basketball coach was he actually has a guide service right in the same hometown I'm from, and he's an avid fly tyer, really active with the local Trout Unlimited chapter. And he actually ended up, we talked about it here and there, fishing and piqued some interest in tying. And he taught me how to tie flies. And then he actually came in and was offering some casting lessons in our phys ed class. So
No, cool.
I think me and maybe another person were really interested in that. Everyone else wanted to play floor hockey or something, but so he brought in a bunch of fly rods and we were all casting. And then he told me about, and I'd been over to his house a couple of times to tie flies, and he told me about these Trout Unlimited fly fishing camps. They call them youth conservation fly fishing camps, and they're all over the country. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah.
But they're great. And so I think I was 13 and flew out to Montana all by myself to meet up with the local TU chapter.
By yourself? No kidding.
Yep. And well, there was actually a guy that was going to a local high school that was affiliated with the same Trout Unlimited chapter. And I flew out with him. I hadn't ever met him until at the airport. And I flew out with him because he was going to be a counselor at that same camp. So I spent a week out in Montana, really refining some of those basic skills. And then I went to New York and the Maine camp, and then helped out as a counselor at the Maine camp because I really just dove headfirst into fly fishing and fly tying pretty quick.
You liked us just a little tiny bit then, huh?
Yeah, absolutely love it.
That's cool.
But it's all I think about most of the time: hunting, fishing, and all things outdoors. So that's really how I got into it, and what really sparked my interest.
What were your college years like?
College years were, so the first year of school I went and I stayed on campus at the University of Maine, Machias. And there's not a whole lot going on in down East Maine, including fishing. And I mean, there's fishing and hunting, but it's kind of an odd geographic area. Grand Lake Stream actually is technically in down East, but that was still an hour and a half from there. So, broke college kid. I wasn't able to get out, travel too far out of the Machias area. So there's some smallmouth fishing and some trout fishing here and there. But after 1 year of that, I decided I was going to go back home and commute 40 minutes to Unity College, small environmental college. And that way I was able to work. I was able to go to school full time. And then in my off time, I was able to go to all my same stomping grounds and fish, and then still do my weekend trips, up north and fish then, because I was able to work and a little easier. There wasn't a whole lot of work in down East Maine at that time. So made it a lot easier to be my, trout bum self.
Okay.
and do all the things I like to do. So
yeah, it's got to be hard to be surrounded by all that fantastic fishing and trying to get a college education.
Yes, it's hard to stay focused, but at the same time, commuting was actually a little bit better, I think, because where it was 45 minutes, it was a long enough drive where, you don't want to drive back home between classes. And I was able to space out my schedule so that I'd have 2 or 3 hours between classes. And I was able to just go to the library, get everything done that I need to. And I would rarely have to go home and deal with homework and projects. I was able to work or fish. So I think it ended up working out pretty well for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Really good. And so it sounds like you're doing some hunting too. What kind of hunting are you doing?
I've kind of dialed it back a little bit. I used to do a lot more hunting and fly fishing is kind of taken over more so, but I really get into deer hunting come November or the last week of October through November. I turkey hunt, I duck hunt, and I like to go for woodcock and ruffed grouse as well.
Oh, it's fun. You got a dog?
Birds. Yeah, so I have he's almost 8 years old. I have a lab, and he's more so the waterfowl dog.
Yeah.
And he loves to go for walks in the woods, and he he never really was trained on flushing birds and things like that. He knows, okay, that was a bird he shot, I'm gonna go find it. So now I have a 1-year-old German wirehair pointer that I've been working on quite a lot last year. Been a little bit lazy with training this winter, getting back into it now, but he's super smart dog, and he just instinctively gets it. So, I mean, the first time we actually went out with I went to a local trainer in the area. And it's like a big group where everyone comes together with these high energy pointers. And it's great because you have a lot of distractions and you're able to work. He goes through in a group, and then everyone gets a chucker every night. So you end the night with working over an actual bird, not shooting, just point, flush, leave it and come. And he really took to that really well. And then I started that only probably a month and a half before bird season started. And he was probably 6 months. And bird season started, and I'm kind of new to this area that I'm living in now. So I just went and kind of found a piece. I said, well, that looks like good bird cover. It's kind of like fish. It's, fish will be where they want to be, and birds will also be where they
Same
want to
thing.
be. So I was able to find a little piece of cover, and we flushed up one woodcock, and it, piqued his interest. He didn't flush it. We just did kind of stomping
Right.
around.
He thought it was cool. Yeah.
Yep. Thought it was cool. He got excited. He's like, oh, okay, that's like, one of those chuckers. So he knew what a bird was. He knew he wanted to hunt them. And then we went just a little bit further, and I had him on GPS collar and a bell, and he stopped, and I went looking around and follow the GPS, and I come up behind him. And he's looking back at me. He's looking back at me, and sometimes as a pup, he'll point at something. It could have been a little mouse or something, or it could have been a leaf that just moved funny, and now he's locked onto it. He kind of got locked onto things like that. And I walked up behind him, and he took one little step towards it and flushed up a woodcock. I shot it. He ran, got it, brought it back to me, and healed. So
you shot a bird over him. Is that right then, huh?
yeah, right then, first day out. So I was okay.
How about that?
I think he gets it.
Yeah, you got a winner there.
Mm-hmm.
The last bird dog I had was out of this phenomenal, the progeny of this dog was like supposed to be the best, and like something like 1,000 wins in its progeny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I took this dog out, and we thought we kind of broke it into the gun. And the first time I took the dog really hunting, first shot, that dog ran a quarter mile back to the truck, hit under the truck, and that was it for that dog.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that English setter. He's just a really timid, shy dog. He's an English setter, and I could never fix her.
Yeah, I hear they can be tough.
They can be a little timid.
I always started with associating it with food, so it's time to eat and have them wait and hold. And I would make some kind of loud noise, clank some pans together, anything. And he's like, okay, loud noises are fine.
Yeah.
And then eats. And then I actually bought one of those dummy launchers that takes a 22 blank, quite loud, but he took to that just fine. And it helped having my lab too. I didn't want him to teach him bad habits, but very early on, I was able to use him to show, okay, this loud noise should get you excited and to run and get something, or now you have a job because you heard this loud bang. So
yeah,
I think that helped.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Helped it click,
And now for Doing Good. In this 1-minute segment, you'll hear about great organizations around the country who are doing good for the world through angling. And today we have United Women on the Fly. United Women on the Fly is committed to building an inclusive community that educates, provides resources, encourages, and connects anglers from all backgrounds to the sport of fly fishing. Their website is a treasure trove of information and resources such as local fishing groups where women can get connected with each other, women guide services, and women-owned fly fishing related businesses. They also offer online educational classes and in-person workshops such as Fly Fishing 101, reading trout water, and mending techniques. This spring, they're hitting the road with their fish and hang events to great destinations like North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Montana. If you want to get involved, head on over to uwotf.com and check them out. That's United Women on the Fly. Well, let's shift gears for a minute, and I want to talk about targeting big brookies. So, what is that, seasonally based? Like, what do you need to think about when you're targeting these big fish?
Now, that's probably the most dynamic part of all of it, really. If there's a lot to take into account seasonally. So we talked a little bit about ice out, and fish might be cruising the shallows looking for a quick, easy meal. They had a long winter and they want to eat. So that can be a good time, but the bug activity is low. So you're throwing more leech and minnow based forage patterns, or, chironomids and midges and things that are around and active in that cold water and year round. But then as soon as, it also depends on the water too, know what there is for forage in there. And you really only get that through experience. Or I did want to mention too, there's biologist surveys online that are publicly available to everyone. A lot of them are super, super outdated. Like 60s through 90s are the bulk of them.
Oh my gosh.
And they haven't done a lot to update them, but they're also mostly remote ponds that have low pressure. If anything, probably had more pressure in the 70s than now. It seems like there was less people into it, in like the early 2000s and stuff. So I think they got less pressure than they used to when some of these were written. And so you have to kind of take all of them for what they are, but they'll give you basic depths. They're written by all different people too. It could be a seasonal biologist in 1975 is different than, a full-time biologist in the 90s that wrote it,
Yeah.
So some of them will actually it'll tell you the depth. All of them will tell you basic depth in a basic grid. So you can find some of those deeper holes, which helps, or some of that structure and drop offs. They'll label inlets and outlets. They don't generally label any springs or anything like that, but they can also, sometimes they get as far into what types of forage there might be in there. It'll list the species that they were able to identify from a survey. So minnows and game fish. And then some of them will actually talk about dissolved oxygen, especially if it were an issue, or it'll tell you, your surface temperature, say, you'll read down at the bottom, like August 1979, the survey was done, and the surface temperature was 71 degrees. You go, well, geez, that's not good for trout, especially brook trout. We want under 65 degrees, especially if you are going to catch them and release them safely. But then you could see maybe 2 or 5 feet down, say it's a 10-foot deep pond. Some of them are real shallow, and you have a 70 something degree surface temp. And then just a couple feet down, it's in the 60s. And then a couple feet down, it's, in the high 50s.
That sounded better.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can get some of that information from those surveys. And that's a good starting point. Pick a geographic area that, which basically said, it's called, like, geologically speaking, you have, so you can kind of break the state into thirds, and what's called the Moosehead Plateau really pretty strongly is correlated with wild native brook trout habitat. And that's online. You can see some geologic surveys and other articles that kind of show you that. But I'm trying to think of what the names of them are. I think it's like they classify as like the coastal area, maybe like the lowlands, coastal lowlands, and
Sure.
then you have central Maine and like the foothills. And then you have a rustic, I think they classified it as the rustic valley, which is along the northeastern portion of Maine. And then you have the whole central northern and the northwestern chunk, which is the Moosehead Plateau. So basically from Moosehead region north and northwest of there, anywhere in there, you shouldn't have a problem finding any brook trout. So that's a good starting point. And then identify, well, geez, that looks good from the sky, looking on Google Earth, and then find a survey. You may never find a survey, and that's sometimes more exciting, I think. When you're in the area, well, I'm going to stop by here and make my own survey and kind of figure it out. So
can you send me a link to that survey, and I'll post it on my,
or like an example survey or something?
Yeah, just like, where do you find these surveys? Maybe just shoot me a link and I'll put that up on my website.
Sure. Yep. Yeah, I'll send you one.
Okay.
And I'll pick one too that's accessible, and it's a brook trout pond.
Okay.
So that's a freebie. We'll find one.
All right. Good.
And so I guess all I'm really saying is that as long as you're in that area, you shouldn't have a problem finding brook trout, or, the Moosehead region in general, or the Rangeley region. It's just a matter of putting in the time and really figuring it out where it's worth spending your time. But what I'm looking for is kind of the same with anything. It's hard to look at a pond and say, well, it's flat, and I don't really see anything unless you know what you're looking for. Whereas in a river, you're seeing, all these little pockets, these eddies, these, bubble lines and seams and you can see where the food might be and where the fish like to hold, right? It's something you can visually see much easier with
Sure.
flowing water. But so you're looking for the same things. You're looking for structure, you're looking for cold water, and you're looking for forage, right? So generally in still water, any vegetation is good. The more vegetation, generally the better, the more productive the pond is, and the more insects there will be, the more forage base around the weeds. So weed lines, especially where they drop off to deeper water, and then they have somewhere that they can seek thermal refuge and hide, and they have a place they can eat, is something that I look for. The thermocline, which is, I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard of the thermocline, and it's
Sure.
kind of just this thing that is hard to find and understand the concept of. But all that is really where warm and cold water stratify, and you have a hard layer, where it goes to colder, more oxygenated water, and you have turnover at certain times of the year. Finding that can be difficult. That can be 5 feet down or 20 feet down in some ponds. But that's more so you're going to be searching with sinking lines, or you may have an idea from a survey, or you have some people drop thermometers down and try to, that are digital, might tell them where it is.
Yeah.
Or a small fish finder helps a lot too, and just see where those fish are stacking. As soon as you start marking fish and say, okay, I mark fish at 18 feet and 20 feet and 18 feet, 18 feet. It's okay. They're always right around 18 feet. So you're going to assume that if it's warmer weather, and you have warmer surface temps, then they're probably hanging there because it's the thermocline, right?
Yeah.
Unless you can see some other type of structure, that there's another type of structure there, like a shoal or a drop off or a submerged tree, things like that. They want structure.
How are you going down after a trout at 18 or 20 feet? What are you doing there?
So I generally carry a lot of different lines, not necessarily rigged up, but I use a 10-foot rod first and foremost, because it tends to help get line off the water, have a little bit more control. I like them on rivers too. I'm just a big fan of 10-foot rods. So 10-foot 5 or 10-foot 6. And I usually will, whether they're on me or up in the truck, depending on how far away it is, I'll have a floating line and I'll have a sinking line rigged up at all times. But I usually have an intermediate sinking line, or real slow sink,
Yeah.
a type 3 or 4, and a type 6 or 7, something that sinks fast, and then a floating line with a long leader. And you can fish all those in the same day and have success on all of them, depending on the time of day or what might be happening, as far as insect activity goes. But so say they're down 18 feet, and you have, and I don't want to get too far into, you can really dive into sinking lines, but
Sure.
say you have a type 6, that generally corresponds to 6 inches per second, an IPS sink rate. So if we know that we're sinking a half a foot per second, totally dead falling, granted you don't have an extra weighted fly or something that'll accelerate it as well, but you can count down and know exactly when you're at the depth you want to be at.
Sure.
They make some hovering lines as well, but you kind of use that to search, and that can help. And then counting is key with sinking lines, especially if you don't have a fish finder or anything like that, because I'll use actually Arctic char as an example, which we haven't really talked about, but they like to hold really deep in cold water. So if you have like a type 6 and I need to get down to 30 feet in 40 feet of water, I need to know exactly when I'm there. And I'm not going to hook, you might not hook a fish when you're outside of the range of 26 to 30 feet of water.
Gotta
They're
be right
holding
on.
right in there.
Yeah.
Any deeper, it's no good. Any shallower, it's no good. So you have to be right in that window. So knowing, if you're just searching and you go, okay, I'm going to count to 10 seconds, nothing, we'll do 12 second, 15 second, 20 second until okay, I got a bump. Do that again until you really dial into exactly how deep you want to be.
Kind of experiment.
Yeah, which can be a daunting task at times, for sure. So it's definitely nicer May and June, when the water's much cooler and trout are just spread out everywhere and can feed anywhere and aren't confined to the thermocline.
Yeah.
Midsummer can be difficult for that reason. They're either at a thermocline or they have to be at a at a cold spring seep, or it has to be a pond that doesn't stratify and stays cool through all depths all year, which there are plenty of those as well. But there's some spring hole fishing. You get these big upwellings, and you can identify those if you know what you're looking for a lot of times by fish like to rise, even if they're not feeding, they like to rise on those springs. So look for rising fish. Look for, different coloration of water. Generally, you have some different algae or vegetation growing subsurface, as well as if you have a spring that's seeping in from a bank, you can see completely different. You might just have a kind of a bare bank and conifers all along the bank, and then you see, oh wow, what's all this really bright green grassy area? That's probably some sort of spring seep coming in from the bank. That could be all that they need to sustain those trout.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, or a little inlet or anything like that.
What kind of tippets are you using? How selective are they?
So I generally build my own. Anything subsurface, I do like to use fluorocarbon. It just sinks faster. It refracts less light. It's more abrasion resistant. It is more expensive for sure, but I'll usually run. Well, and that depends too. But I like to run a little on the longer side. But 9-10 foot leader. If you're fishing dry flies or if you're fishing an indicator with nymphs or balanced leeches or minnows under it. But if you can just run a floating line and a long leader and strip back some soft tackles or some leeches or something like that, or just crawl them back, or fishing on the rise as well. If you have emergers and they're really getting those big splashy rises out there, and they're hitting emergers and see a fly come off every once in a while, then sometimes I'll throw like a weighted soft tackle that might imitate an emerging mayfly or whatever it may be on that given day, and let it sink. Or you can do this with sinking line too, but sometimes it's nice just not to switch over. You're fishing maybe an indicator and then fish were rising, and then you can just take your indicator off and keep running your long leader, and I'll just let it sink and then bring it vertically up, and they'll hit it in like that top 2 or 3 feet or on that rise.
Vertically up. Okay.
They'll hit it really hard too. So that's always a lot of fun.
Versus like just a real slow hand retrieve.
Yeah. But there's always a time and place for that as well, where you're running a sinking line, and like a lot of ponds that have hexagenia mayfly, even when they're not emerging or it's not quite that time of year, they're burrowing nymphs. So they move around quite a bit. They can kind of swim, they can burrow. But you can crawl those along the bottom, or leeches or anything like that too. And I do a overhand twist. So you just put, anytime I'm retrieving anything subsurface, you want to have your rod tip literally in the water to get rid of any drag.
Okay.
So even if you have 6 inches between the water and the tip of your rod, you inevitably have a little bit of slack there, and you need to see that line jump rather than really feel it. So I put my rod tip literally right in the water, pointing directly at the fly, and I just turn my hand over, whether that's one finger. It's hard to picture just talking about it, but where you just pinch between your forefinger and
I know what you mean. Yeah.
And turn over 1 finger, 2 finger, or 3 finger, depending on how far of a strip you want.
Huh. Okay.
And that can work pretty well too.
What are some of your top confidence patterns, and like what time of year? Maybe take us a little bit, like walk us through the seasons a little bit.
Yeah. So certainly I'd have to say leech, whether it's like the Landon Mayer style jigged mini leech, that's just a mink strip. Those work really well. Rivers, lakes, ponds, really anywhere, stripping them or under an indicator. But I fish a lot of balanced leeches and balanced minnows that are a really sparse semi-steel style fly. You can suspend those under an indicator, or you can strip them back. That's something that I always have, and that's probably what I fish most of the time, subsurface, and that'll work year round. As you get into May, really May through July, but especially May and June, you get a lot of caddis and mayfly hatches, like a lot of quills and Hendricksons. So you can fish dry flies, emergers, or a dry dropper as well. So you just hang something that's, in its emerging stage or something, or is a drown mayfly behind a mayfly dry. As you get into It's really late May through August, but especially June, I find June seems to be a really great buggy month overall. I think you'd find that pretty much anywhere in the country.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like June. And that's really when you start getting into some good ant hatches and terrestrials, things like that. But you also have some mayflies. You might have some caddis skittering around. But terrestrial ants are another staple in my box, mostly because, well, I think fish really like to eat them. I think they must just pack a lot of protein, but they're not something that they're always seeing, because they're not emerging from the water, being terrestrial. But even when there's no hatches happening, you can find them dropping off of vegetation on the shoreline.
Over by the shoreline. Yeah.
Or out of trees. Some of my better days have actually been nothing happening. It gets hot early June and there's no hatch, but nice breeze picks up and you start seeing some fish rise. You see a film kind of along, like we have a lot of conifers around these, all softwoods, but you get like these big pines. And I don't know, when you look at a lot of conifers, you see up close, you see a lot of ants crawling on them, just out in the woods, out and about.
Yeah.
If you pay attention, you'll notice that. And so same deal on the edge of a pond. And then you get these big wind gusts and they blow everything, all kinds of different debris into the water. And you'll see kind of a film line along the shoreline. And you'll see these really subtle sips. And those can be really big fish sometimes, just those tiny little sips. And a lot of times they're eating beetles and ants. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind, is you don't have to be right out in the middle of the pond. You can be out, over on a, kind of deep shoreline where terrestrials are being blown into the water. As well as wind is a huge help a lot of times.
Yeah, right. What's your favorite ant pattern?
I tie a lot of my own, but really the buggier legs, looking really kind of mangled, and we have a lot of big flying ants too. So I like to put some kind of white on the back too, or some kind of wings that might stick down to the surface. It's like a real small Amy's ant can work pretty well, or I want to say it's called like an acid ant or something like that.
Yeah, acid ant, Kelly Gallup's acid ant.
Yeah, those work great. Those are really buggy looking.
Purple, right?
Yeah, yep, purple, yep. But a lot of what I use is just kind of some one of a kind variant that's just slightly different than the last one, and I'll throw everything until I find what they want. But if you're doing something like that, whether you're buying flies or tying flies, you should always have 2 or 3 of everything, I think, because otherwise you'll have that one and just that one.
Yeah.
And it'll be the one to have.
It'll be the one.
Yeah. And then you're out of luck.
That's why you spend $100 at a fly shop on flies,
I know, I'm not helping anyone there.
Yeah, right. You're helping the fly shop.
Right. Yeah. So certainly tying helps, especially with those smaller, easier ties.
Do you bring a vise with you when you're out on these longer trips?
Yeah, I do quite often.
Okay.
And I've actually found that a lot of these simple patterns, fish don't care if it's a pretty fly, but you can tie something that'll fish right in your hand or in a pair of forceps without having to have a vise.
Really? Have you done that? That's cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. A lot of these big striper flies I've been tying lately too. A friend just showed me recently kind of how to do some of these big hollow flies and things like that, which I never really got into. I would just buy them, which didn't really help, or tie something big and ugly that doesn't cast as well or shed water. But those are tied. I'm tying those on a mono extension, and 80% of those are tied in hand. And then you attach that mono extension to the hook and then just tie up the head of the fly.
That's cool.
Yeah. Definitely takes some practice, but we were tying up some have you heard of a golden retriever?
The fly?
Yeah. So that's, I want to say, so Jim Finn is the creator. He's actually a friend of our friend that has a camp up to Grand Lake Stream. And that's how we were turned on to this golden retriever. And it's a phenomenal fly. I've used it everywhere. He's caught something like hundreds of species on it. He'll tie them for saltwater. He's caught Atlantic salmon on them. He created the fly, but essentially all it is a woolly bugger. And what I'm getting at is we needed some, and we were actually tying them by hand under headlamps.
Really?
I think it was last September. Yeah. Because we needed some for the next morning. So we were tying them by hand.
That's awesome. That's
One
epic.
person brought a vise and he's tying on the vise, and the rest of us were
Give me that
tying in
thing.
hand just to have something. But it's basically a woolly bugger, so it's easy to tie. But it's just a golden colored tail, or like butterscotch or marabou tail, about 1.5 times the length of the body. You're tying it
Oh,
on like
big.
a eight or yeah, yep, big long tail for a lot of movement. Tying it on like a 8 or 10 streamer hook, and then doing a fat floss body, red floss, with a
Oh,
really big red floss collar behind a gold bead. I like to use tungsten so it has more motion. And then the ribbing, you don't have, you're not tying with hackle, wrapping that up forward, but instead you're just using this gold estaz, that kind of crystally estaz, in gold as well. You space it out, do 5 wraps on the body. That's what Jim would say. So it's spaced out enough so that you use the medium estaz so that you still have some kind of undulation to the body, but you're seeing that red show through very prominently,
yeah.
and it is just a magnet.
Do you find that you need brightly colored flies more in Maine than you do maybe in other places?
Certainly for salmon. I think salmon, maybe some fall brook trout really like those bright flies. But you can fish those in any way. But no, I think overall, especially in like your pressured tailwaters, you're still, you don't have to go to size 26 midges like I was doing in Colorado recently. But you still want to have some smaller natural looking variations. But a lot of these ponds aren't really pressured either. But that golden retriever
That's a good one.
seems to do it a lot of times. Yeah.
Would you mind sending me some pictures of these flies we've been talking about? I'll put them up on my website.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Put them on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah. And actually, that golden retriever worked on some Arctic char last May, third week of May. I was at Libby's, and had these two clients with a Orvis group for a week, and brought up, just in talk, just, sitting around having a drink at the end of the day, and brought up these Arctic char, also known as blueback trout, which there's only 14 ponds in Maine, which are the only 14 ponds in the entire US
That's amazing.
that have this strain of landlocked Arctic char. And it really is special. There's a couple ponds you can't fish at all. There's a couple that don't have great populations, so it'd be difficult to be successful. So we're talking 10 or less ponds that are worth your time.
Okay.
And we mentioned that, and of course, that piques a lot of people's interest, such a rare fish. And I said, well, we can go do that. There's a couple ponds right in this region. So they had paid for a flight. You got one, what was it, 2 days of flying, 3 days of fishing by truck and hiking. And so we decided, well, we'll take the plane over there. It's an hour drive, so we might as well fly over there. It takes 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. So we flew in there, and they can be pretty tricky to target. They're deep. You're fly fishing, so if you need to get out a good cast, say if they're 30 feet deep and you can only cast 20 feet, well, that's going to be difficult because you're going to be completely vertical and still above where they're feeding. So at that point, sometimes you got to let line and paddle away, and then let it keep sinking, and then strip it in without trolling or dragging your line, because that's not legal in fly fishing only ponds.
Huh.
By
Okay.
definition in Maine, you can't drag
Can't
the
troll.
line at all. Yeah. Which I guess we could have in this pond. I think that's artificial only. But so they each wanted to just check it off the box, catch one. The only fly that we fished all day was a golden retriever, and we put 45 char in the net.
45.
45.
You got dialed in, man.
And that was just a fluke, I mean, we always catch fish there, always have some interest, but this is some success. But that was just a banner day, and we were just, we got locked onto them quick, and we stayed dialed all day, and that was a blast.
That's awesome. Well, as we're winding down here, I wanted to ask you, when you think about Maine, I just feel like there's a lot of information out there about Maine. People have their own conceptions about Maine. What do you think's the biggest misconception about Maine?
Jeez. Wow, that's a good question. The biggest misconception about Maine. I've always heard some ridiculous ones when you travel. Like, do you guys have internet up there? Kind of think we're that.
I've heard you guys have really wild accents. Like you can hardly understand people that are from way up north, but I can understand you fine.
Yeah, yeah. And I work down east, we call it. And that's where I went to school that first year. And they often have some pretty thick accents, but I never picked up much of an accent. I'm not really sure what causes that, because it's not everybody in that geographic area. You hear
Yeah.
one person that has a really strong accent, and then then their neighbor doesn't at all, and they're both grew up there. So
Like
I'm not really
Boston's
sure what that is, but I guess that is a common misconception.
Boston's the same way. I mean, you could have people that, park the car and you can't, very thick accents, and then
Yeah.
people that don't have an accent at all. And they live a couple miles apart in Boston.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I think that we all just eat lobster all the time. And no, I don't know, there's not really too many big misconceptions that I hear too often that aren't
Okay.
to some extent true.
All right. Oh, no kidding. All right. That's very good. All right. So I got to end with some food questions. So I got two food questions.
Sure.
One, sounds like there's not a lot of restaurants way up here, but like, where do you like to go at the end of a multi-day trip for a great meal?
Yep. Yeah, so geez, I guess when you're getting back to civilization, I would have to say Oxbow Brewery. Tim Adams, he's a very avid, very um, involved fly fisherman. He's big in the fly fish community, but he makes some of the best beer. But he's well known. You can strike up a conversation with him and a lot of people that might be there about fly fishing. So that's always nice when it's at the end of a fishing trip. But
That's great.
some of the best beer in the state consistently. He's got a few locations, but as far as food, in Oxford, he's got the Oxbow Beer Garden. Really cool atmosphere, outdoor seating for the most part, and it's all wood-fired pizza with all local ingredients.
Oh, nice.
He uses a lot of local ingredients too, even from the farm and the garden out back there for a lot of the beers. But yeah, really phenomenal. And you're not going to find that beer really very often outside of Maine, or even in a lot of retail stores. You don't find it very often. So
You
you
got
have
to
to
go
go to one of
there.
the locations for the most part. Yeah.
So what city is that in?
That's in Oxford.
In Oxford. Okay. You said Oxford, Maine. Didn't know there's an Oxford, Maine.
There
Now I
is.
do.
Yep.
How
We
about
we
that?
named a lot of places after a lot of
Oh,
European cities and
Yeah,
countries.
right.
And
Right.
weren't too original with a lot of
Got to
them.
pick something. All right, that sounds like a good one. Okay, now what's your when you're guiding on these multi-day kind of wilderness trips? What's your favorite camp food to cook for people?
I do a lot of hunting. So if they like wild game, I do like to incorporate a lot of deer meat or moose meat or something like that. Whatever
Okay,
I might have. I always have deer meat, so that's always a good one. But not everyone's big on it, so I always
you're
bring
right.
some other options. But I find if I've always been a big fan of Mexican food, and a lot of people tend to like it. There's so many different things you can do with it, and it's quick and it's good food. It's
Good
quick. It
energy.
fills you up. Yeah, good energy.
Yeah.
And it's easy for a big group, or to do on a
Okay.
tailgate or something like that. But it depends on what we're looking for. If we want to, through like Weatherby's, we do a lot of shore lunches where it might be steaks or pork chops or like a whole chicken, half a chicken,
Okay.
stuff like that over an open fire. So we'll do that. Like we do a remote trip. So Weatherby's is down east, and then in the Moosehead region, we do a September trip. That's 1 week, and it's all at a primitive campsite. We do all the cooking and everything. You just bring the tents, everything. You just show up,
Yeah.
follow us to the campsite, and then we guide you for the week. And we'll do a lot of over the fire cooking, but then it's a lot of walking, and it's a remote river. So we're packing lunches a lot of times. But you have to, but if you go to Weatherby's and you're on the river, which is just down over the hill, walking distance from Weatherby's, a lot of times, or a really short drive, then we're able to do a shoreside lunch as well.
nice
So it
shore
really
lunch.
depends on how ambitious we are, and you know what it is looking to do in a day.
What do you like better, moose meat or deer meat?
That's a tough one. I would say moose meat.
That's what I've heard.
Probably, some of that might have to do with that I don't have it as often. It's hard to get permits.
Yeah.
I always have deer in a lot of different forms. Everyone always has deer.
You ever popped a moose yourself?
Nope, no, I haven't. I actually, it's a point system. Supposedly, they say that's how it works. I put in for a really long time, and you can buy extra points. I did that. If you miss 1 year, you lose all your points.
Oh, geez.
So I had a lot of points saved up, and then a few years back, I missed the deadline, and it just put a sour taste in my mouth. And I didn't
forget
try
this.
again. Yeah, but
Oh
I mean to
gosh.
get back into it.
Hell, or just no buddies who get moose every year, right? Who get drawn.
I have a friend that is a taxidermist and a meat cutter, and he's just, I don't know why he can call a moose better than anyone I know. And he doesn't guide or anything. He just goes along for, just feed him and give him beer at night, and he'll come and call in a moose for you. And he goes on a lot of hunts, so he tends to have quite a lot of moose meat. But
well, man, we could go on forever. There's a lot to talk about here, but
yeah, absolutely.
Nate, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, it was great to be on. Fun talking with you.
Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you, or if they want to book a trip or just learn more about Maine?
Yeah. So I do have a website. It's Heritage Waters. Make sure you have the S on the end. heritagewaters-mainguide.com.
Okay.
And you can find my email, my personal phone, some pictures there. Keep you interested if you want to just scroll through and look at some of what we were talking about. You can find some of that there. But certainly ways to get in touch with me. And my Instagram isn't associated with my company, but it's wandering _ spelled out _waiting. That's on Instagram. And you can find me on Facebook as well. But all that you should be able to find through my website as well. I need to make sure my links are working, but
all right, very good.
Double check.
Awesome. All right, folks, there you go. Give Nate a shout. If you guys want to check out the Maine North Woods, sounds pretty amazing to me. Nate, I wish you extraordinary success and all your adventures to follow. And folks, thank you so much for listening.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. We will post Nate's contact info on our Destination Angler show notes and some of those pictures of his top fly picks he's going to send me on our Facebook and Instagram pages. You can DM me or email me at comments or suggestions to shag50@gmail.com. And if you like the show, please tell a buddy. As always, our music is by Brothers Fountain. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again soon. Tight lines, everybody.
Well, I'll go from the land to the shining sea. But I know there's more to life than what the eye can see.